I should have known something was wrong when he started hiding his phone, smiling at messages I wasn't meant to see, but I never imagined he was living a double life. And when I discovered the truth, I realized it wasn't just betrayal, it was war. This is the story of how I took back everything he thought he could steal. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful story. Part 1: The Message That Broke Me. The morning started too quiet. Even the rain outside sounded like it was holding its breath. From our penthouse window, Manhattan glittered below, busy, alive, beautiful, and I stood there pretending I belonged in that picture, pretending everything was fine. Marcus had kissed my cheek on his way out. "Another meeting in Midtown," he said, same suit, same lie, same tone that made my stomach twist without reason. He smelled like sandalwood and ambition, and for a moment I almost believed him, almost. When the elevator doors closed behind him, the silence felt heavier than usual. I tried to shake it off, made my coffee, checked my schedule, opened the curtains wider as if sunlight could drown out whatever I was feeling. Then his phone buzzed on the counter. Normally I'd never touch it. We had trust. That was our thing, at least it used to be. But that morning, something inside me moved, soft but sharp, like intuition tapping on my shoulder. I wiped my hands, glanced at the screen. Just one letter, L. My heart gave a weird jolt. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe L was Lewis from his firm. Maybe L was lunch. Maybe. Then it buzzed again. "Last night was worth every risk. I miss you already." Everything inside me went still. The air left my lungs. I could actually hear the blood rushing in my ears. For a few seconds I just stared. Maybe I'd misread it. Maybe it was some cruel mistake. But when I scrolled, reality hit me like a damn truck. Messages, photos, voice notes. Her laugh, her voice, her baby. And his replies, full of warmth I hadn't heard from him in months, the kind that used to be mine. I swear I could feel something tearing inside my chest, a soundless snap, like glass cracking under too much pressure. Her name was Lana. Short, sweet, poisonous. I sat down on the marble floor, phone still glowing in my hand. The city outside kept humming like life didn't just collapse around me. I didn't cry at first. Tears felt too small for that kind of pain. I just stared until the screen dimmed and my reflection stared back, hollow eyes, trembling lips. Then came this small, broken laugh, the kind that slips out when you're too numb to scream. "Wow, Selina," I whispered to myself. "You can predict market crashes but not your own damn marriage." That laugh turned into a sigh, long, shaky, heavy enough to drown in. When I finally stood up, I placed his phone exactly where it was. Everything looked untouched, because that's how Marcus liked it, perfect, controlled. But inside me, something dangerous was waking up. That evening when he came home all smiles and champagne, I played my part. I hugged him, laughed at his jokes, even asked about his meeting. He talked, unaware that his lies were slicing through every word. He didn't know I'd already started watching him differently. Every pause, every smile, every time he reached for his phone, I was memorizing it all like a detective disguised as a wife. Days passed, and piece by piece I started connecting dots, credit card charges, dinner receipts, hidden photos, until one night there it was, a picture of him and Lana, her head against his shoulder, his hand on her waist. My hands were shaking when I saw it, but the tears never came. Only a single whisper left my lips, cold, steady, almost foreign to me. "Selina Crestwood doesn't get played." I looked in the mirror, eyes swollen, mouth trembling, and then a small smirk, a spark, the first sign of the woman I used to be. And that night, under the quiet hum of the city, I decided I wasn't done. I was just getting started. Part 2: The Stranger Who Knew My Pain. I didn't sleep that night, not even a minute. The city lights outside my penthouse filtered in like tiny confessions, tiny witnesses to the chaos brewing in my life. I kept replaying the messages, the photos, every little laugh he shared with Lana. How could he? How the hell could he? The next morning I didn't reach for coffee. I reached for strategy. My gut told me someone else was in pain too, someone walking around unaware that their life was being quietly stolen. Turns out I was right. I ran into him at a small cafe downtown. Ethan Rivers, Lana's husband, tall, calm, his brown eyes carrying the same silent storm I was carrying. He didn't smile at first, he didn't need to. His presence alone was telling. I felt it in my bones, he knew. We didn't exchange pleasantries, we didn't need to. I know, he said, flat steady, everything. And just like that my breath caught again, not out of shock but relief. I wasn't alone in this. Someone else felt the betrayal, the sting, the sick realization that the people you trusted most are living double lives. I studied him, the way he held his coffee like armor, the subtle tremor in his hand that betrayed calmness, and suddenly an idea formed, dangerous, brilliant, necessary. You know them, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. Lana, she's been hiding, and Marcus, he's good at hiding. For a moment, all the rage, heartbreak, and betrayal I'd bottled up poured out, a shiver down my spine, my fists gripping the edge of the table. I want to make sure they feel the cost of this. All of it, every damn lie. He didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned in, his voice low, steady, filled with the same fire I suddenly realized I had too. Then we do it smart, not messy, not petty, smart. And just like that, an unspoken alliance was born. Two people scorned, walking into a game we didn't ask to play, but we'd play it better than they ever imagined. We shared everything, their patterns, their favorite hideaways, their habits. Every lie they thought was secret became fuel for us, and the more we talked, the more the anger burned in me. Not blind rage, but controlled, sharp like a scalpel. I found myself laughing, soft, bitter, when he told me how Lana had thrown a fit last week because Marcus hadn't answered her texts fast enough. Oh, the audacity, the sense of entitlement, and yet it made me stronger, smarter, more dangerous. By the time I left that cafe, the plan had already started forming in my mind. Every move, every confrontation, every reveal had to be perfect. We weren't just going to expose them, we were going to make sure they understood betrayal has consequences. And maybe, just maybe, it would feel good. That night I stood by my penthouse window again, Manhattan stretching endlessly below me. I clenched my fists, feeling something I hadn't in months, power, real power. Not the kind Marcus thought he could give me, not the fake smiles or expensive gifts, my own. I whispered, almost laughing, almost crying, Selina Crestwood doesn't just survive, she strikes back. Part 3, the first needle in the seam. I told myself revenge would be surgical, not savage. Clean cuts, precise wounds that leave them with nowhere to hide. But standing in my kitchen that morning, I felt something else, an electric, childish thrill. Like the first time you realize you can break something and get away with it. I started small, a whisper, a shadow, a text that looked like the wrong number but wasn't. Marcus was careful, trained in charm and deflection, but not invincible. People who lie quickly make the same little mistakes. They rush. They get sloppy, and God, I watched each flaw like it was a new map to his ruin. I crafted the message at my desk, hands steady, heart hammering like a timpani. It said nothing overt, it implied everything. It read like a secret spilled. We both know the bungalow can't hold secrets forever. Sent from a burner number. No sender name, no trace, perfectly vague, deliciously destabilizing. I hit send and waited. The waiting was its own kind of punishment and pleasure. My phone vibrated 2 minutes later, a brief, clipped reply. Who is this? He typed like someone stumbling awake. I let him sweat. Later that afternoon, a delivery arrived, a small, anonymous box left at his office concierge. Inside, a framed photo of him and Lana at a rooftop bar, the one I'd found. Nothing else. Just the image, nothing that tied back to me. When he opened it, the brightness on his face dimmed. I watched the video feed from a distance like a hawk that knows exactly when to dive. He called me that night, voice thin, pretending calm. Did you get my text? He asked, cadence clipped. Guilty men always speak clipped. No, I said, voice silk over steel. Must be spam. He kept pushing, angling for proof, for control. I gave him none. Instead I let the seed sprout, little doubts, a rustle of paranoia. He texted Lana. He checked his email more often. His hand twitched every time his phone buzzed. It was intoxicating, watching his composed mask crack inch by inch. Ethan and I met twice that week, trading intel like spies. He had his own arsenal, receipts, texts from Lana's gallery that didn't line up with her stories, bank transfers at odd hours. We stitched their story together like quilting a confession. The more pieces we had, the clearer the picture. They'd built a life on stolen silences. But we didn't go public, not yet. The art of revenge, I realized, wasn't about spectacle. It was about dismantling the illusion, make them feel small, unravel their safety. Watch as the house of cards they've stood on for years collapses, silent and personal. At a rooftop event Marcus liked to haunt, I played my role. The composed wife laughing at the right jokes, heels sharp, lipstick perfect. Inside I was a furnace. Lana floated near him, syrup sweet, the kind of actress who believes her own lies. I cured myself of the urge to slap her. Instead I let a look, just one, slow and cold, slide across the room and land on Marcus like a verdict. Later, in a private moment, I planted a whisper in the right ear. A mutual friend, harmless and gossip-ready, asked Marcus if everything was okay. The friend mentioned the anonymous photo and the burner message. Marcus flinched. He blamed shadows, storms, accidents, but no one believed accidents twice. That night, back in our bed, he squeezed my hand like a man begging forgiveness from someone he's convinced will absolve him. I let him, not because I forgave him, but because I wanted him to think he still had me, to let him carry the weight of doubt into his sleep, to watch him wake with guilt like a hangover. I lay awake, plotting the next thread. I tasted something raw and electric, not hatred only, but power reclaimed. The city hummed below, and for once the noise felt like an ally. Selina Crestwood had started a game, and in that game every move was poetry, every silence a blade, every look a trap. We thought they were careful, we thought they were clever, but the next move would force Lana and Marcus into a room where secrets don't have a place to hide, and someone would finally have to tell the whole truth. Part 4, the invitation that felt like a trap. I told Ethan the plan in a whisper over the phone, and even his silence was a promise. We needed a place where they felt safe, a slice of their fantasy life, somewhere their masks would naturally drop. The bungalow Marcus had gifted Lana for weekend escapes, that spotless little lie in the Poconos, was perfect. Cozy, isolated, with too many windows and nowhere to hide. When I sent the invitation, my hands trembled like a kid stealing candy. It was an open, innocent-sounding invite. "We miss you, come up for the weekend. Bring wine." Sent from my real number, signed with my name. Marcus didn't hesitate. People who cheat are terrible at reading nuance when something flatters their ego. We drove up Friday afternoon. The roads thinned, trees leaned in like conspirators, and the air smelled like rain and pine, soothing, stupidly honest. Ethan met me there, eyes quiet, jaw set. He carried a canvas bag of receipts and prints, the physical pieces of their affair we'd gathered like evidence in a museum of betrayal. Walking into that bungalow felt surreal. Lana had left a vase of wildflowers on the mantel, cheap and deliberate, like a curtain someone thought would hide a stage. Marcus greeted us with that practiced smile, slick, a little too bright, like a man who believed charm could glue anything together. We did dinner like families do. Light laughter, forced toasts, the clink of crystal. Lana sat across from me, braid over one shoulder, eyeliner sharp, her laugh a little too loud to be honest. I kept my hands folded, fingers white-knuckled against the linen napkin. The anger was a constant, a low simmer. But there was something else, an ache that made my throat tight, the soft part of me that remembered when Marcus used to fold his arms around me during thunderstorms. Ethan cleared his throat and raised a glass. "To friends," he said. I almost choked on the word, friends. The word had the taste of irony in my mouth. Halfway through dessert, the mood shifted. A power outage, they said, classic storm move. Candles were lit and shadows grew long, faces suddenly honest in the wavering glow. Marcus reached across the table to squeeze Lana's hand. She leaned in like a magnet, obeying a law she'd written herself. That's when Ethan stood. His voice was calm, surgical. "We need to talk about something," he said. "All of us now." My pulse leapt, a percussion drum in my ribs. Lana's smile faltered. Marcus's jaw tightened in the candlelight. The bungalow felt like a fishbowl, and the tiny room had nowhere to breathe. Ethan placed a stack of prints on the table, receipts, photos, bank transfers, each one a quiet bomb. Lana's laugh died on her lips like a cut grape. Marcus tried to reach for his phone, that reflexive button to control panic, but I put my hand on his arm and shook my head. "Not yet. Let the silence do its work." "You two have been building a secret life," Ethan said, voice even. "We all saw the pieces. We thought confrontation would be cleaner with everyone here." Lana's face crumpled in a way that made something inside me soften and twist. She opened her mouth, and for a second I thought I'd feel pity. Then she said, small and sharp, "I'm pregnant." The words landed like a blunt instrument. For a beat the world stopped. The candle flame froze mid-tremble, the rain outside held its breath, and Marcus's eyes went wide like a man stripped to the bone. He reached for her like he could anchor himself there, shame and panic, and something painfully human mixing in his expression. My chest filled with a new recognition. Life doesn't present fair decisions. It arrests you with consequences no one predicted. Ethan's face was unreadable. He didn't hit anything. He didn't shout. He just looked at Lana, then at Marcus, and then at me. If that's true, he said slowly, we still deserve the truth. His voice had a rawness I'd never heard before, like a violin string being plucked too hard. In the wavering candlelight, secrets unraveled faster than any of us expected. Lana confessed some things, left out others. Marcus babbled apologies that sounded like practiced prayers. I felt something break and reform in me, anger braided with an odd, tiny pity. This wasn't a movie, it was messy and real and ugly. When the night finally collapsed into exhausted silence, I stepped out onto the porch and let the rain hit my face. It felt like forgiveness and not forgiveness at the same time, cool and cleansing and sharp. I whispered to the dark, "This changes everything, but not in the way you think." Their confession opened a new door, one that led straight to a buried ledger and a secret bank account Marcus thought he'd hidden forever. When we found it, everything they'd built would either save them or destroy them. Part 5, The Ledger in the Drawer. When Lana said those words, pregnant, I felt the world tilt and then keel. It wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was a tangle of lives, of choices with human weight. That night sleep was a joke. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the city like it might cough up answers. It didn't, so I did what I do best, I looked for facts. Ethan and I went back to the bungalow at dawn under a quiet sky. The storm had washed the world clean and left everything sharp. He moved like a man used to drafting lines where others saw chaos. I watched him lift cushions, peer in drawers, open closets with that careful calm of someone who's forced to see truth every day. We found it hidden behind a stack of old takeout menus, tucked in a bottom drawer of a mahogany desk Marcus loved. The ledger looked small and unassuming, the sort of thing you'd ignore, but the pen strokes inside were loud. Names, dates, wire transfers, coded references to accounts. It was a road map of deceit. My hands went cold. My throat tightened like I'd swallowed ice. The more I read, the more the picture sharpened. Hush payments, offshore transfers, gallery commissions that funneled into shadow accounts. Marcus had been laundering feelings and money with the same reckless ease. Ethan's jaw clenched. He's been moving money for years, he said quietly. Not just for Lana, for investments tied to properties, stuff that would keep them comfortable no matter what. The anger in his voice was low, like a train you can hear miles away. We took photos, we copied pages. Every line felt like a betrayal inked in black. I felt like a fraud detective in heels. Part of me thrilled at the chase, part of me sickened that the man I loved could do this. God, how do you grieve a version of someone who never existed? Back in Manhattan, I sat under the kitchen light with a glass of whiskey I didn't want but needed. Each sip burned a little, but it cleared the fog. I called my lawyer's number I'd kept for emergencies, financial security, career stuff. I need to protect myself, I said, voice steady but raw, and I need to protect what's mine. My lawyer sounded the way lawyers do, sharp, efficient, and immediately useful. She told me to freeze joint accounts, document everything, and for God's sake, don't confront him with the ledger until we had a plan. Legal moves, she said, are chess, not a slap in the face. I liked her already. But legal chess needed proof, and proof needed paper. So we staged it. Fake bank inquiries to confirm transfers, quiet requests for statements, small subpoena-like digs that our lawyer handled with gloved hands. Marcus was oblivious, parading around the city as if his sins were invisible. Men like him mistake visibility for innocence. At night I cried, not loud, not dramatic, but the kind of wet, ugly weeping that empties you. I remembered our wedding vows, the way he'd pressed his forehead to mine and promised forever. I wanted to scream at the sky and at him and at myself for believing that forever could be bought with glossy words. But tears can be strange medicine. They leaked pain, yes, but also carved out space for action. Ethan and I worked late into the week, assembling a dossier that would make a bank blush. When we were done, the evidence was cold and undeniable. Marcus had a hidden account tied to shell companies. Lana's gallery invoices were a joke, fronts for transfers that made no sense unless you knew they were lying. I remember standing in my closet, slipping on heels, looking at myself in the mirror. For a beat I hated the woman staring back, betrayed, bruised, trembling. Then I squared my shoulders and saw something else, steel. You can't bankrupt me, I told my reflection, but you can bet I'll bankrupt their lies. We weren't done with raw revenge theatre, this was strategic. The ledger was the kindling, the legal fire would burn smarter. Freeze assets, file papers, expose the network, make them feel the collapse not as spectacle but as consequence. And underneath it all, a quieter voice whispered that when the smoke settled, I would still have to rebuild, me, my life, my peace. That thought frightened me more than anything. We found the money trail, but the next move would force Marcus to face public consequences. I arranged something small, humiliating, and irreversible, something that would make him panic in front of the people he performed for. When that happened, he wouldn't only lose cash, he'd lose his mask. Part 6: The Gala and the Quiet Collapse. Gala nights in Manhattan always smell like ambition and bad decisions. I'd stood under that chandelier before, laughing, networking, playing the flawless wife. Tonight the crystal looked sharper, more accusing. Marcus was the star of the evening, a keynote about integrity and development, his smile polished, his handshake warm. The room was full of clinking glasses and people who loved being seen with power. Ethan met me at the mezzanine, his face a calm mask but his eyes were set. We planned this like surgeons, precision, no theatrics, no cheap tabloid moments. The ledger and our legal moves had been set in motion, accounts frozen, subpoenas filed, an anonymous tip to a watchdog that made banks pull alerts. It was all perfectly legal, just painfully public. He squeezed my hand once, I squeezed back, that squeeze felt like armor. I'd rehearsed my smile in the car, mapped my laughter to the right decibel. I would be the picture of composure. Let him watch me, let him think he'd broken me. Marcus took the stage like a king. Lights warmed his hair, turned his apology-ready face into something benevolent. He began talking about vision, community, responsibility, the lines actors learn when they've been playing a role too long. The audience loved it, they clapped and blinked and bought the narrative. Then someone in the crowd stood, a bank rep I'd tipped off quietly through our lawyer. She asked about recent irregularities associated with Crestwood Holdings accounts. Her voice sounded official, calm like a metronome. The room tilted, Marcus's smile flickered. He answered with the practiced deflection I'd seen 1,000 times, but her follow-up was colder. We've placed temporary holds pending investigation. The hush before the storm was electric. Glasses paused midair. The chandelier seemed to pulse. For a second I felt a weird, surreal guilt. People's faces registered the news, their admiration curdled into confusion. Marcus's jaw worked. He tried to steer the conversation, to minimize, to charm. It failed. The room could see him without the fog. He wasn't a visionary in that light. He was a man being exposed in real time. Backstage, he slammed a hand against the dressing room door and called me, voice raw, a thing I heard only in the quietest of fights. "Selina, what the hell did you do?" he demanded. I didn't answer. My silence was a sentence. The press swarmed, investors whispered. Marcus's allies pivoted away like a wave receding. I watched from a corner, heart pounding so loud I could taste metal. I wanted to feel triumphant, but the truth flashed. This wasn't only about him. There were families, jobs, fragile livelihoods tangled in his web. I felt a stab of real sorrow for the people who'd backed him in good faith. Ethan met me afterward at a side door, his face pale but steady. "They're panicking," he said. "He's gonna try to spin, expect lawsuits, expect threats." There was a cold clarity to his words. "We did it by the book, but men like him don't go quietly." That night Marcus called again, softer this time, a man bargaining for mercy. He begged for discretion, for time, for a chance to fix what he'd broken. His voice sounded small, stripped of pomp. A strange compassion rose in me, brief and hot, like sunlight on an exposed wound. I thought about his mother, his childhood, the way humans fracture and try to glue themselves together. Then I remembered Lana's laugh in our bed that had not been mine, the ledger's black strokes, the receipts that read like betrayal. We'd shattered his stage, but the shards cut deep in ways I hadn't fully pictured. I slept badly, dreaming of figures and balances, of lives rearranged. Power reclaimed tastes different than I imagined, bitter and necessary. And as the city breathed below, I whispered into the dark, "If he fights dirty, I'll outmaneuver him, but I won't become him." Marcus didn't bow out. He rallied lawyers, friends, and the kind of public spin that smells like desperation. He'd launch a counterattack aimed at everything I'd hold dear, my reputation, my company, my home. And he had one weapon left I hadn't accounted for, a truth about my past that could ruin everything. Part 7: When he struck back. They say the higher you climb, the harder the fall. They forget to mention the things people will throw at you to speed the trip. After the gala, I told myself I was ready for the backlash. I thought I'd prepared for everything. I was wrong. The next morning my inbox was a war zone. Threat letters, angry investors, whispers from PR firms I'd never heard of. My phone lit with numbers I didn't recognize. Marcus had done what scorned men with power do. He rallied lawyers with polished shoes, allies who owed him favors, and worst of all, he reached into the past. A package arrived at my office that afternoon, slipped under my door. No return address. Inside, 3 glossy printouts and a single line of type. "We thought you hid this well." The photos were from 10 years ago, me younger, hair shorter, mouth laughing in a bar after a rough breakup. Not scandalous on the face of it, but the notes hidden in the margins, emails cherry-picked, out-of-context quotes, a late-night text I'd sent to someone I thought was a close friend, painted a narrative. The kind of narrative that feeds tabloids and terrifies investors, the kind that says you're unstable, untrustworthy, dangerous to their bottom line. I felt my stomach drop like someone punched the air out of me. A memory flickered, college nights, stupid mistakes, a time I'd been raw and reckless. I'd owned my past in private, buried the shame, learned from it. I never imagined it could be weaponized to ruin my present. Marcus's lawyer called with velvet menace. "We can make this go away," he purred like a cat who knows where the mice hide. "But it will cost you." He left the rest to the imagination, reputations, board votes, the kind of rumors that metastasize overnight. My team rallied. We moved fast, PR specialists, legal counsels, crisis managers. I sat in a glass room watching them work like surgeons, listening to words like damage control and preemptive transparency. My throat tightened with every strategy. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw the printouts into the East River and burn whatever remained of the man I loved. Part of me wanted to curl under a blanket and disappear. But shrinking wasn't an option. Not now, not ever. I'd learned the hard way that people give you respect when you stand, not when you fold. We chose truth, careful, measured truth. We drafted a statement acknowledging my past mistakes without drama. We lined up character witnesses, colleagues, mentors, women I'd helped in pro bono financial counseling. We leaked controlled background checks showing my finances were solid, my tax records clean, my board votes intact. The idea was simple: drown their lies in verifiable fact and make their smear look like the desperate flailing it was. Marcus escalated. He sent a rumor to a major outlet suggesting I'd used company funds for personal reasons. An editor called, hungry, smelling a story. I leaned into the call, voice steady, heart racing. I answered every question with clarity, provided documentation on the spot. The story stalled, not dead but wounded. At night the weight of it all pressed on me. I walked the city streets because sleeping was impossible. The lights blurred, somewhere someone laughed, oblivious. I thought about Ethan, his quiet resolve, the way his face had gone hard the night he found the ledger. He'd lost too. His eyes, when this first broke, weren't only angry, they were tired. I kept asking myself the same small, cruel question: would I become someone who throws dirt to win? The answer came back like an oath. No, my revenge wouldn't be mud, it would be clarity. It would be rebuilding while they stumbled in the mess they made. But Marcus had one more trick. He hinted he had proof tying my name to a business decision that could be twisted into negligence. He promised the next drop would be private, surgical, devastating. He sounded like a man who believed his own invincibility. I slept 3 hours that night, woke up with the adrenaline of a cornered animal. I sharpened my resolve into plans: more transparency, more legal pressure, a public campaign showing the real victims of Marcus's schemes. If he wanted a war, I'd make it about him, his networks, his transfers, the ledger we'd found. I would drag his empire into sunlight. And deep down, beneath strategy and steel, there was a raw, tender corner that still ached. I missed the man I thought I married. I missed the safety I once had. That ache weirdly made me more dangerous, because I had something to protect that Marcus could never touch, my integrity, rebuilt and fierce. He aimed to ruin me with an old secret. I aimed to collapse his empire with a new one. Next, I would make the ledger public in a way that lawyers couldn't bury, and in doing so, force Marcus to defend every lie in daylight. Part 8: The Ledger Goes Public. I knew the moment we made the ledger public, the air would change. People pretend money moves in neat lines, but secrets live in the margins. Small digits, quiet accounts, the invisible hands that feed a lifestyle. Expose the margins and the whole thing unravels. We set the stage like a surgical press release. My lawyer prepared a packet, clean, unassailable, filed with regulatory bodies and distributed to the press via channels that left no fingerprints on us, only facts. Ethan and I sat in the conference room, shoulders almost touching, the dossier between us like a weapon and a promise. When the first story dropped online, my stomach did somersaults. Headlines bloomed like dark flowers: Serious TWOOD holdings under investigation, offshore transfers linked to art gallery, investors started calling, board members texted in panic. Marcus's phone went silent in the way guilty men's phones do, ring after ring unanswered, the sound swallowed by whatever world he'd tried to build. He tried to fight it with words at first, spin, charm, denials polished to a shine. He called me, voice tight with seizure-level desperation. "Selina, this will blow over," he said, as if you could sweep a ledger under the rug with confidence. I wanted to hurl his phone into the East River and watch it sink with him. I closed my eyes instead, breathed, and let him ramble. His panic felt like vindication. It also felt like grief, the kind that tugs at your chest when something you loved reveals itself as a lie. The city reacted. The watchdogs moved. Marcus's board convened emergency meetings. I watched the live feeds, the clips of his public statements, the way his facade stiffened as each new fact came out. He looked smaller under the cameras, the man who once towered over anyone who crossed his path now standing in a clearing, exposed and shivering. But making the ledger public did more than uncork his collapse. It brought witnesses. Former employees who'd swallowed uncomfortable decisions began to speak in hushed emails to my team. An accountant he'd used to wash numbers started cooperating, his voice raspy with guilt. Each new detail braided into the case until it felt unassailable. Ethan and I taped it all into a timeline that felt like justice, methodical, patient, relentless. Yet victory tasted weird. There were nights I lay awake and pictured every person whose livelihood might be threatened as their money froze in bank accounts. I folded that worry like a letter and sent it to the bottom drawer of my mind. This had to be done. There were lines you didn't cross, and Marcus had crossed them like a man drunk on entitlement. As pressure mounted, Marcus tried a counter. He leaked a sliver from the past package to one reporter, a caption meant to suggest I was as culpable as he. The smear was familiar and old. I'd expected it, prepped for it. I answered publicly with clarity, documents, witnesses, timelines. Truth has a brittle power when it's backed by paper and people who remember. Then unexpectedly there was a quiet moment. I walked past our wedding photo, two younger faces, naive smiles. For a second I allowed myself that flash of what had been, reckless, bright, real. It hurt. Maybe that's why this entire crusade felt both righteous and raw. Revenge can be cathartic, but some things you can never reclaim. The legal calls turned into subpoenas, then into sealed hearings. Marcus's empire began to creak under auditors' scrutiny. He lashed out, lawsuits, PR attacks, threats, but each strike disclosed more of his network. It was like he was trying to claw his way back up with hands already full of holes. One night under a thin drizzle, Ethan texted me a single line. "They're scared." I smiled without meaning to and felt a small, private triumph that made my chest warm and raw all at once. But the warmth was edged with something steadier: fatigue. I'd been running on adrenaline and righteous fury for months. I was good at the running part. I was less practiced at healing. I whispered to the skyline, voice small and deliberate, "This is for every woman who trusted and was betrayed." The city answered with a siren in the distance, the world continuing even as ours trembled. The ledger had torn his empire open, but Marcus wasn't finished. He had one last, dangerous play that would drag this fight into a courtroom and test everything we'd built. If we lost there, all could collapse. If we won, we'd finally breathe. Part 9: The Courtroom and the Quiet Edge. The courtroom smelled like dust and expensive coffee, like a place that expected people to fold under pressure. I'd stood in worse rooms, boardrooms with brighter lights, but this felt rawer. This wasn't about contracts. It was about truth, and truth hits like bone. Marcus arrived with an entourage like armor. He moved through the room polished and practiced. Cameras clicked. Someone near the back sobbed, maybe a worker, maybe a friend. My hands were steady. My heart was not. We had prepared for attacks. Lawyers with battle faces, boxes of documents, timelines that read like indictments. We expected spin, smears, last-minute tactics. But I hadn't expected his lawyer to set a folder down with that casual cruelty and talk about a withheld merger detail as if it were lethal. My mouth went dry, not because I was guilty, but because the past can be used like a blade. Ethan squeezed my hand under the table. That grip steadied me. We'd lined up witnesses, crafted statements, preempted narratives. Still, the courtroom turns context into scandal if you slip. The first witness's testimony felt surgical. A former employee described transfers, meetings, coded language. Each sentence fit the ledger like a key. The jury scribbled, Marcus's smile thinned, and somewhere far away I felt the tide begin to turn. When I walked to the stand, the oath tasted metallic. "Tell the truth," the judge said. I did. Not polished, not performative, just facts and the nights I'd spent piecing them together. I spoke about love, betrayal, finding the ledger, the receipts, the cold math of deception. My voice shook once and then found its center. In the gallery someone sniffed, the hush felt heavy and raw. Marcus's team tried to needle at me, old emails, late-night jokes from a different life, but our witnesses were ready. Ethan's testimony was quiet and fierce. The accountant we'd encouraged to help laid out transfers in a voice too tired for lies. The ledger wasn't gossip anymore, it was evidence. Then came the thread that cut through the last of the air, an investor email on the screen where Marcus discussed contingency plans for personal complications. The phrase was clinical and brutal in its implication. His composure slipped, panic twitched across his face like a bad flag. We put people on the stand who'd been silent for years. Their names, receipts, late-night logs, fragments braided into a damning pattern. The prosecution's case felt relentless, neat, devastatingly clear. When the jury left to deliberate, the room felt empty and loud. Ethan and I sat side by side. Relief hummed under my ribs, exhaustion braided with a strange, brittle hope. We'd forced light into corners that had lived in shadow for too long. Still, the verdict would decide everything. Outside, rain fell soft and steady. It kissed my cheeks like a small absolution. For a beat I let myself believe we'd won. Then a cold prickle ran down my spine. Marcus had one desperate move left, and men like him don't go quietly. I left the courthouse with the city folding around me, the skyline a blurred promise. I had told the truth. I had played my part. Now the world had to answer. Before the gavel fell, Marcus released something that could change the story. Not about money this time, but about a piece of my past he'd kept hidden. When it hit the press, it would test everything I'd rebuilt. Part 10, the drop that felt like winter. Just when the courthouse felt like the thin end of a blade that might finally cut free, Marcus pulled his last, filthiest card. The city had been raining for days, as if Manhattan itself knew we were living inside a storm, and on a Wednesday morning my inbox exploded like a bomb. A 10-second clip, no context, no timestamps, just a dimly lit video of me at a charity gala years ago, younger, louder, hair shorter, talking to a man who'd been a donor. In the clip I'm laughing, hand on his arm, a wine glass in the other hand. Someone had clipped it, looped it, and added a caption that whispered everything they wanted people to believe. Selina Crestwood, comfortable, blurring ethics. The text spread like a stain. My stomach dropped so hard I swear the floor tilted. I watched the video once, twice, a dozen times, each loop carving out another hollow in my chest. The footage was real, a moment taken out of context and weaponized, edited to imply intent where there had been none. It was cowardly, precise, surgical. The press smelled blood. Reporters called, cameras appeared outside my building like hungry birds. The story that had been about Marcus's misdeeds folded into the new headline. Selina Crestwood, questions about judgment. He wasn't just trying to smear me, he was trying to drown our case by making me look untethered, reckless, dangerous to investors. He wanted to make me a character in his lie. I felt rage first, hot and immediate, like acid under the tongue. Then came the shame, quick, traitorous, because whatever the context, people would see only a looped second and make 1,000 assumptions. I thought of every woman who'd been reduced to a clip and labelled. My throat tightened, and for a flash I thought of stepping back, of letting someone else fight this battle. But that wasn't me, not anymore. Ethan didn't flinch when I sent him the clip. He came over, face set like flint. "They'll try to make this personal," he said. "They'll want you to shrink." He spoke like someone who'd watched men try to rewrite truth into garbage. "We answer with proof, context, witnesses." We moved like surgeons again. My PR team released the unedited footage from the gala, lengthier, softer, a room of people, laughter, a toast that had nothing to do with deals. We released timestamps, guest lists, matching photos that showed the donors' behavior across the night. My legal team filed a motion to compel disclosure. Show your edits, show your sources. Marcus's legal team screamed defamation, and for a moment the world looked like a courtroom I'd never wanted to be in. The media cycle churned. I granted 2 interviews, calm, measured, a voice with a tremor under the surface but steady. I told the truth, not the performative kind, but the blunt, human version. I admitted I'd made mistakes in my past, that I'd been younger and sometimes careless, but I refused to let an edited clip rewrite my entire life. People like Marcus bank on spectacle. They forget strategy is slower but harder to stop. Even so, the hit landed. Clients hesitated. A board member sent a terse text asking for reassurance. Friends called with empathy and questions. The ledger and the courtroom hadn't made me bulletproof. They'd only given me armor that needed repair. It sucked. The sting of it was intimate, a betrayal that felt oddly personal even though it was engineered. That night, alone on the balcony, I pressed my palms to the cold glass and let the city wash over me. My reflection looked tired and fierce at once. I whispered into the rain, "You don't get to rewrite me." It sounded like a promise and a challenge. Marcus had thrown his last grenade. It exploded. But explosions aren't endings, they're shifts. We'd buy the time we needed: subpoenas, motions, witness depositions. It would be messy, it would be loud, and it might hurt. But somewhere under the noise, a quieter truth hummed. The fight had never been about spectacle. It had been about being seen clearly. If Marcus wanted war, he'd get it, and I'd make sure the truth took longer to tell than his lies did to cut. With the edited clip released, the press circle tightened. The next move had to be surgical, a public hearing that would either break Marcus's narrative or let his poison fester. We were going to take him to the well and force every witness to speak on record. Part 11, the hearing that scared the city. The courthouse felt different this time, louder, like a stadium packed with careful whispers. Cameras were cages now. Interns with clipboards moved like nervous animals, and every seat held someone who wanted to see a fall. This was no longer only about money or marriage. It was about reputation, about who we let live above reproach in this city that worships facades. We arrived early. Ethan and I sat in the front row, shoulders touching by habit, as if proximity could steady the tremor under my ribs. My team had done everything: witness prep, cross-exam strategies, a dossier thick enough to sink a small boat. Still, as I watched people stream in, I felt that old, stupid human thing, fear. I'd read statements, prepped answers, rehearsed my breathing, but nothing makes the heart quiet like the sound of 16 cameras clicking at once. The hearing began with procedure and polite monotone. Then the first witness took the stand, a woman from Marcus's acquisitions team. Her voice was flat, but her testimony peeled another layer off his story. Memos, late-night conference calls, off-book transfers. Each document she read echoed harder than the last. Marcus watched with that same shiny mask, but his hands trembled now. You could see the calculation in his eyes: which lie to drop first, where to bleed. Then Ethan stepped up. His testimony was quiet but devastating. He spoke about pattern, not passion, bank patterns, gallery invoices that read like wish lists, payments routed through shell companies. His words were measured, no theatrics, just facts, and the courtroom drank them up. There was a small, hot pride in me hearing his voice steady. This man who'd been knocked to his knees stood up for truth like it was the only currency that mattered. Cross-examination came at me like tide. Marcus's counsel tried every trick: imply motives, dredge up my past, suggest that grief makes conspirators. They played my younger clips on a loop for the room to gawk at, like vultures sniffing for soft spots. I felt the old shame, quick and slick, but it slid off something in me. The preparation had hardened me, and when the time came, I spoke plain. Context, timelines, receipts, witnesses. Truth, boring and stubborn, bruised the spectacle. Just when I thought we were steering the ship, the room shifted. A clerk approached the bench carrying a sealed envelope. Everyone leaned in, even the cameras seemed to hush. The judge peered at it, his face unreadable. No one had told us about this. The envelope had come in under the radar, anonymous, time-stamped, and now sitting like a bomb in the judge's hands. Marcus's lawyer smiled like a shark. "Your Honor, may we request it be admitted?" he asked, voice oily. The judge nodded, slow, no objections. Protocol got trampled by momentum. The bailiff opened the envelope. A single USB drive inside, plain, anonymous. The court tech plugged it into the system. The screen flickered. For a second the feed was static, then a voice, Marcus's voice, filled the room. It was unmistakable, laugh cadence that practiced charm I'd tried to remember fondly once. Only this time the words were private, blunt and cold. He was talking about cleaning up loose ends, about moving money so the public can't touch it, about treating relationships like transactions. My stomach dropped. The room went still in that way that makes your ears ring. I felt like someone had taken my chest and squeezed. Ethan's fingers dug into mine. Marcus's face, if a man's face could fold inward, did exactly that. He was a man seeing the scaffold beneath his throne snap. I wanted to stand, to scream, to shove the screen away. Instead I sat, feeling every eye on me like pinpricks. The recording kept playing and each word was a nail. When it finally cut, the silence that followed was louder than any applause. The judge looked at the attorneys, then at Marcus, then at me. "This changes the scope of the inquiry," he said slowly. And in that small, seismic sentence I understood, we hadn't just revealed bookkeeping, we'd revealed intent. We had the language of guilt now, raw and unedited. The recording would be authenticated, lawyers would scramble, and Marcus would face his worst moment in public. But first, his team would retaliate with everything they had. The next part would be the courtroom storm, the reveal that either frees me or buries us all. Part 12, The Reckoning and the Sunrise. The city felt colder that morning, even through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse. The courthouse was behind me, but its echoes followed, murmurs of Marcus's downfall, whispers of the recording, the ledger, the testimonies. The storm we'd summoned had not yet passed, but for the first time I felt a pulse of something deeper than adrenaline, relief mixed with clarity, sharp as winter air. The courtroom had been brutal. Marcus's lawyers flailed, scrambling to dismiss the USB evidence, casting shade on witnesses, threatening counterclaims. But every tactic fell flat. The judge's gavel sliced through each feint, each desperate whisper of doubt. Marcus himself had sat like a caged animal, blinking under the weight of exposure. I remembered every second of it, my hands clenched on the table, heart hammering not with fear but with purpose. By the time the verdict came, the tension had built so high it felt like it might lift the roof off the courthouse. The jury returned, their faces tight, eyes unreadable. I could feel Ethan's grip on my hand, a silent anchor. When the foreperson stood and read the words that confirmed Marcus's intent, his misappropriations, the court's acknowledgement of deception, it hit me like a tidal wave. Relief, yes, but also a strange, sweet vindication. The man who had tried to unravel my life was exposed, utterly, publicly. Outside, the rain had softened to a mist. I stepped onto the streets of Manhattan, the city shimmering like fractured glass beneath streetlights. People moved around me, oblivious to the private triumph that had just occurred. I breathed in the cold, wet air, and for a moment let the tears come, not the angry, bitter ones, but quiet, cleansing ones, the kind that feel like healing, like the world is turning back to right. Ethan stayed by my side. "We did it," he said softly, his voice carrying relief I could feel in my bones. No triumphalism, no gloating, just the quiet acknowledgement of battles fought and won. I nodded, too exhausted to speak, but my heart hummed with the power of survival, strategy, and righteous action. That night back in my penthouse, I sat by the window, city lights reflecting off glass like 1,000 tiny affirmations. I opened my laptop, drafted new plans for my consulting firm, and reviewed messages from women who had reached out for advice after seeing the press coverage. Their gratitude, their faith in fairness and truth, lit a warmth inside me I hadn't realized I'd missed. Revenge had been sweet, yes, but it was justice and the reclaiming of self that truly healed. I poured a glass of wine, the kind I'd saved for rare nights, and raised it silently to the skyline. Manhattan stretched endlessly, alive, indifferent, and forgiving. I whispered into the quiet, "Selina Crestwood doesn't just survive, she rises." And in that rising I understood. Betrayal had tried to define me, manipulate me, destroy me, but I had reclaimed my story. I had made Marcus accountable. I had found my voice again. And in that reclaimed voice there was power, independence, and the kind of peace that comes from knowing you have fought for yourself and won. The sunrise came slowly, brushing golden light across the cityscape. I watched it with open eyes, with no fear, no hesitation, only quiet resolve. Today the world was mine again. Today I was free. And for the first time in my life I am not afraid to explore it alone. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.